people when they're young involved in the community, because sometimes you don't know the power that you have if you start putting it to use early on. There's something I found interesting that was said earlier in regards to identity. Many times when I'm in New York or I'm in DC, you know, you might meet somebody. I'm one of these people when I'm in New York, which is my home, and because I work for NASDAQ, I go up there a lot on business. But I'm kind of a simple person, so even like my food tastes simple. So when I'm there and I go eat, I don't go to like nice New York fancy restaurants and so on and so forth, unless it's business. I typically just go to a food truck. And a lot of food trucks, they have a lot of halal food trucks up there, so I go there and, you know, I grab something to eat. And for so many years, you know, you get a lot of the brothers that will say, brother, Somali Language, I can talk to your brother. So brother, where are you from? I said, I'm from here, New York. No, brother, I mean before that. Oh, Queens. No, brother, I mean before that, where do you come from? Oh, before that. Oh, I was born in the Bronx. Oh, okay, no, brother, no, your parents, where are they from? Oh, my parents, I know what you mean, Harlem. Again, I'm from New York, my parents are from New York, my grandparents are from Virginia. I said, I took Shahada. Okay, my parents are, I said Allah is Allah everywhere. He's not just Allah in what's now a Muslim country. Oh yes, brother, yes, I understand, you know. But it's interesting because people do want to, your identity and who you are is important. But people want to peg you, like Joshua said, to a certain way, a certain place. Interesting, something happened to me years ago. When I was working on Capitol Hill, a gentleman called me, used to work for the State Department. And he said, Brother Jamil, I want to talk to you about what I'm doing now. This guy named Alex Kroner. He said, I want to talk about what I'm doing now. I'm putting together this video called Muhammad, Legacy of a Prophet, and I thought it's going to be about people who are practicing Muslims here in America who are trying to follow the Prophet's Sunnah. He said, I think that you should be in it. So I said, okay, well, you know, if you think it'll help, then sure. So I'm thinking he's going to come in and have a camera and ask me some questions, you know, for about 2 hours and, you know, do whatever. Well, 2 months and about 20 hours worth of film later, we do this piece. And what was interesting was, as it was preparing to come on, they do the initial marketing. And they take clips of you, and they go to different places, and they show, like, a clip here, and talk about it. So I'm down in Tampa, Florida, and they show some of the clips. And so the first question I get is from an East Asian woman. And the first thing that she asks is, well, why do you have to be Muslim Americans? Why can't you just be American? And my answer was twofold. First, I found it kind of interesting coming from someone Asian that she would question me about my feelings about my American identity or my Muslim identity. But the thing was, I told her two things. I said, first and foremost, one, before America, there was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After America, there will be Allah. On the day of judgment, there will be Allah. So that's my first concern. And I said, number two, where is the conflict? America has no official religion. I'm American because I was born here. Some people are Americans because they become naturalized. But there's no thing that says, I said, what is the official religion of America? Is it Christianity? Is it Judaism? And so on and so forth. So all of us have our American identity and what we also bring with that and what that means as our part of it. You know, I was having a breakfast with Keith Ellison the other day, Congressman. And I remember when he was running for office, and another congressman from Virginia, from this state, Virgil Good, had questioned whether or not a Muslim should be in Congress. And Mr. Ellison made it clear to him, there's no religious test in America. Everybody comes and brings what's a part of them to the table. If you go back and you look at, you know, the founding of this country, the initial Constitution was not meant for everybody. Matter of fact, it wasn't meant for anybody in this room, for what I can see. But people came and they brought what they offered, and they fought, and they challenged, until they became an accepted part of the community. This is part of the test. The Constitution does not guarantee anybody's rights, because it's a piece of paper, it's a document. It's human beings that guarantee each other's rights. But the only way to do that is to be engaged. Now, sometimes as young people, you think that you don't have any power. You think, well, all the older people, they're in the elected offices, they have the businesses, they have the big jobs. What can we do? Well, let me tell you something. The power of youth and energy, see, that's one thing that's great you guys have. When I was your age, I had a lot of energy. Now I'm 2, maybe 3 times up, well, at least 2 times. Let's go with 2 times older than some of you. And I still have some energy, but it's not like it was. Trust me. But the fact of the matter is, you can have an impact. Whatever Allah has decreed for you, that is what it's going to be. Your job is to go out and do the work. There was a time when the companions of the Prophet Muhammad asked him, Ya Rasulullah, if everything has been decreed, should we even act? And the Messenger of Allah said, act. And those acts shall be made easy for those for whom it was intended. If you take a look at the time of the companions, who was the second person to take Shahada? Because you got to make sure you're studying your deen. Does anybody know who was the second person to take Shahada? No. No, not Abu Bakr. No, she was the first person to take Shahada. I'm talking about a young person. Ali ibn Abu Talib, that's right. Ali ibn Abu Talib was the second person to take Shahada. He was the Prophet's first cousin, but he was living in his household at that time because Abu Talib had so many children. So the Prophet Muhammad was taking care of Ali. And when he heard what the Messenger said, I will follow you. And this is a great comfort to Rasulullah, and we know that Ali ultimately became one of the Khalifa Rashideen. You take 2 people during that time, 2 young people, Abdullah ibn Abbas and Aisha bin Abu Bakr, 2 of the youngest of the companions. But they became, even amongst them, and think about this, because of their opportunity to learn from the Messenger of Allah as a young person, they are known as 2 of the biggest scholars. Remember, when you talk about the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, any one of them would be the biggest, giantest scholar during this time. These are 2 young people who were considered some of the best knowers of the Quran and the Sunnah during their time. So imagine their scholarship. And they were 2 of the younger people amongst the Prophet's companions. In this country, anybody, we talk about the civil rights movement, which means a lot to us as African Americans, as black people. What took place in the 50s and the 60s. And so important that the name of Martin Luther King has become a holiday. Anybody know how old Martin Luther King was when he led the Montgomery bus boycott? You're close, a little older. He was the head of a church. He was 26 years old. Now, what I learned about him as a young man in elementary school, that seemed like, a very grown man. But now that I'm a little older than 26, I realized, man, what a big effort that was for a young person. He was 26 years old. Around the same age, a little older than some of you. And look what that ultimately came out to be. And make no mistake, there were older people there who were advising them, people who have been working for years. So you don't put the older people aside because they have experience and wisdom that you may not have gained yet. But don't minimize your value. And when I talk about sometimes just making the effort, and Allah will do what has been decreed for you, think of Malala Yousafzai, if I'm pronouncing the last name right, who's the youngest receiver of the Nobel Peace Prize, just because she wanted the opportunity for her and those like her to go to school. So never diminish the thought of what you can do. Because you may look to do just a small something. and it ends up being much bigger than you ever imagined it would be. Now, the issue of getting involved. Today, there were huge marches in D.C. and other parts of the country in response to the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner, New York. Now, coming from New York and having had many interactions growing up, and we'll call them interactions with the police, I have my own feelings about it. It doesn't stun me at all. Between myself and my friends and some of the issues that we had to deal with, these things will continue to happen as long as we continue to allow them to happen. And one thing we have to understand, but like I said, when this country was founded, it wasn't founded for the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everyone. People had to make their way and say, no, I'm also an American, and I'm going to be included. So I want you to think of a few things just before we finish. 3 aspects. If you want to accomplish something, you have to be active, and you have to do it together. You know, Musa led his people out of Misr, out of Egypt, and he had his staff, right? And he parted the sea, touched the staff. He did many things with the staff, and the people, they just followed. But during the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, no, it was the Ummah that got things accomplished. If you remember in the Battle of Uhud, just because a few people disobeyed the Messenger of Allah, they lost a battle they should have won. And this is a lesson to us that we have to work together and we have to work unified in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And there are a couple of traits that you have to have. Wisdom, you have to have hikmah, wisdom. You have to do things with experience and wisdom, which means if you don't know, go and ask those who do know. So they can help you and guide you and give you some experience in how things work. You have to have sabr. Many times people will say, well, we tried that, it didn't work, I'm done. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ preached for 13 years in Mecca. By the time he finished, he only had about 100 followers. But look what happened after that, when they went to Yathrib. In less time than that, in 10 years, all of Arabia had become Muslim. So it may not happen when you want it to happen, but it will happen in Allah's good time. So you have to have wisdom, you have to have sabr, and then you have to have the help of Allah, which will come if you have wisdom and sabr. Your success will mean sometimes when you see things you don't like, means going beyond protesting. It means knowing where the pressure points are and knowing how to push those buttons. And that takes learning and understanding of the system and how to deal with it. And believe me, you can make change if you understand that. But always keep in mind that ultimately you're working for something bigger than yourself. If your only purpose is to gain something here in this world, then you may do that. Allah may allow you to do that. But ultimately, it won't mean anything. If you do something for the Ummah as a whole, for a bigger picture, then surely Allah will make you successful, even if your role only appears to be a little bit. And so, I really appreciate the program. I appreciate seeing so many young people out here. You need to help me in how I need to get more young people out in Prince George's County. All right? I'm just now getting the older people out. If I can get the young people out, we can really move. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So Sarah Cedric Cochran is a conflict analysis and strategy professional with experience in international and intergroup conflict management, where her focus is on digital public engagement strategies and tools for addressing conflict, especially in the Middle East and South Asia. In 2007, she co-founded OneBlue.org, a Washington, D.C.-based 501c3, which addresses conflict using new media technologies to educate, engage, and share perspectives across global audiences. Sarah earned triple BA degrees in economics, political science, and international studies, with honors and distinction from Southern Methodist University and an MA in conflict resolution from Georgetown University, specializing in the impact of new media technologies on global conflict. Sarah is currently Virginia State Director for Emerge USA, a civic engagement entity that promotes education and participation of Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities in the American electoral process. So, could you please give a warm welcome to Sarah Cochran.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Before I start, I want to thank Anab. I think very few people see her or get the nice opportunity to see her once a week at the Adams Center. She is such a beacon of light in the masjid. She's been so active and helped us in so many ways, and just seeing her every week kind of energizes me. So I don't have like 10 days to go over conflict resolution and how it plays into the Somali situation. But conflict itself is a very negative term. And the type of work that I do, it's sometimes we realize that we have to ask the question, is conflict ever really resolved? And I prefer to say that conflict is actually transformed. And what are the ways that we can do it? So today I'm going to run through, maybe quite fast for some of you, some tools that we can use to help us to address the whole dynamics of Somali American. And perhaps, before we start, I could establish the fact that when you work on something on a global scale, it's like a ripple effect. Peace and understanding begins with an individual, then it spreads to a family, then to a community, then to a society, then a country, and then it goes global. So I want all the young people in this room to think about goals that they can accomplish in terms of what's more tangible, what's more realistic, in changing their immediate surroundings before they decide or think about the larger issues of the world. I'm not saying not to be interested in those larger issues, but obviously change starts at home. So the question is, how do you find who you are in this day and age in the United States? And the situation of Somali Americans is no different from people from my country, from India. The same thing as what is an Indian American, what is a Pakistani American. It's the same question. So the challenges that we face right now, so defining yourself exists in two ways. Who are you culturally and who are you religiously? And some would argue in the conflict resolution field that religion is a part of culture. But the challenge that you face is defining yourself in terms of what are cultural practices that you brought back from your homeland, and what is an American Muslim? What does it mean to be an American Muslim practicing your religion? And sometimes you find that you'll be separating what are cultural practices that I learned from being a Somali versus what are my universal Muslim qualities of identity that I'm going to retain. Another thing is the question of empowering yourself and building stronger families where the generations are able to connect with each other and there's no sort of disconnection between parents and their children. And also serving local communities, which relates back to what I was saying about trying to reach out to your immediate surroundings before you think about more global issues in other places. Currently, the situation of Somali Americans is no different than, like I said, other immigrant diaspora communities. There's stress caused by trying to assimilate. There's aggressive behaviors that come from being in a conflict zone or conflict area. There's racial discrimination, which we talked about, which other ethnicities in this country face also. There's the use of khat, which is, as you know, a sort of special, I should say, somebody equated it to be finding some cool stuff at Whole Foods. But it's the equivalent of speed, and it's considered illegal in the U.S. So there's issues with that, with the Somali American community and U.S. Legal system. There's school opportunities. A lot of kids coming from Somalia come with a very shaky foundation in basic education, and then they're put into classrooms with kids that have actually had a different type of foundation. So they're faced with challenges of fitting in academically. Language barriers, being able to communicate with your surroundings as soon as you arrive here. Of course, these are all immigrant situations that I'm suggesting, and I see a lot of you are probably first-generation Americans, but these are The majority of people arriving in different states go through these things. There's a family dynamic, so do the older generation understand what the challenges are that the younger generations face? There's also clinical vulnerabilities. People come here with physical ailments.